Land of the Swirling Mist Cave Incident. Tom Dawson and Bob Sacco were experienced cave explorers. They went to explore a new cave called Land of the Swirling Mist Cave in Colorado. The cave had big rooms filled with piles of rocks. Tom decided to dig through a pile of rocks to find a new tunnel. He lay on his side and started pulling rocks away. Suddenly, a huge rock slab fell from the ceiling. The heavy rock slab landed on top of Tom and trapped him. The rock broke several of Tom's ribs, and his left shoulder was badly hurt and he couldn't move it. Tom was pinned to the cave floor and couldn't breathe well. Bob heard Tom crying in pain and started digging to help him. As Bob removed rocks, the slab pressed down harder on Tom. The rock slab shifted and hit Tom's head. His helmet was pinned under the heavy rock. Tom used his free hand to unbuckle his helmet strap. He pulled hard, and the helmet strap came loose. Tom quickly slid his body out from under the rock. The rock crashed down right where his body had been. Tom's ribs were broken, and his shoulder was badly hurt, but he knew he had to get out of the cave right away. Tom ran toward the cave entrance as fast as he could. Bob gave him a flashlight and followed behind. Tom felt dizzy, and his head hurt badly. Near the entrance, he had to crawl through a narrow space. Halfway through, Tom collapsed because he was so hurt. His wife, Nancy, was waiting near the cave entrance. Nancy heard Tom calling for help. She grabbed his clothes and pulled him out of the narrow space. Tom pushed with his feet to help her drag him out. Nancy pulled Tom all the way to the cave entrance. His wife ran to get their phone and call for an ambulance. They drove to meet the ambulance at the visitor center. Tom was rushed to the hospital. The doctors found he had a concussion, broken ribs, and internal bleeding. His shoulder was dislocated and he had many other injuries. Tom almost died, but he survived the terrible accident. Kong Adventure Cave Incident. Carl O'Keefe was a 49-year-old father from England. On April 22, 2023, he took his family to Kong Adventure Center for his niece's birthday. The center had fake caves made of fiberglass for people to explore. Carl went into the caves with his children to have fun. His kids crawled through the narrow tunnels easily because they were small, but Carl was too big for the tight spaces. The cave tunnels got narrower and narrower as he crawled. Carl tried to turn around in a tight section of the cave. He got stuck between the walls and couldn't move forward or backward. Carl was trapped and couldn't breathe well. His children noticed something was wrong and ran to get help. The Adventure Center workers came quickly to help. They tried to pull Carl out with ropes, but he was stuck too tight. The workers called the police, fire department, and ambulance. Mountain rescue teams came to help too. Carl had been trapped for almost 1 hour. His breathing got worse and he was getting very sick. More rescue teams came with special equipment. Workers took apart parts of the climbing wall to reach Carl better. After 4 hours and 7 minutes, they finally freed Carl from the cave. Carl was not breathing and looked very bad. They rushed him to the hospital right away. Carl was in the hospital for 10 days in very serious condition. His family stayed with him and hoped he would get better, but Carl's injuries were too serious. On May 2nd, 2023, Carl died from his injuries. Fool's Crawl Cave Incident. Yale was a young pit bull dog who loved to explore. His family took him on a trip to a cave called Fool's Crawl. Yale smelled something interesting and broke free from his leash. He ran straight into the dark cave before anyone could stop him. His owners were very scared because the cave was dangerous. Fool's Crawl Cave had narrow tunnels and deep water pools that could trap people. The owners called park workers for help right away. The park workers called Tom Engel, a cave rescue expert. Tom brought 2 helpers named Emily Davis and Mike Warner. They arrived at the cave at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Emily put on a wetsuit and took dog treats with her. She went into the dark cave with only a flashlight. Emily walked 300 feet into the cave and found Yale, but Yale was very scared and growled at her with his teeth showing. Emily backed away slowly so Yale wouldn't attack her. She came back to tell the others that Yale was too afraid. The team decided Yale's owner should go in to get his dog. Mike gave his cave gear to Yale's owner. Emily and the owner went back into the cave together. They found Yale 100 feet deeper in the cave. When Yale heard his owner's voice, his tail started wagging. Yale ran to his owner and licked his face happily. The owner put a leash on Yale, but Yale wanted to leave right away. Yale led his owner out of the cave very quickly. They came out of the cave at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Everyone cheered because Yale was safe and not hurt. Yale's family promised to keep him away from caves forever. Lechuguilla Cave Incident. Emily Davis Mobley was a 40-year-old experienced caver. She went on an expedition to map unknown sections of Lechuguilla Cave in New Mexico. Lechuguilla is one of the deepest and most complex caves in the world. Emily and her team went into the cave to explore and map new areas. They navigated through tight squeezes, jagged rocks, and vertical drops. After hours of exploration, the team reached a remote section of the cave. This area was rarely visited because it was very difficult. Emily led the way, squeezing through a narrow passage. The walls pressed against her as she moved forward. Her helmet scraped against the ceiling. Emily tried to move through an even tighter spot. She placed her hand on a massive boulder to move up. The boulder had been loosened by years of dripping water. The massive boulder slipped and crashed down on her leg. It jammed her leg into a crevice. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. She was miles deep into the cave, far from any help. The rest of the team realized something had gone wrong. They came to help and moved the massive boulder off her leg. As hours passed, the pain in her leg got worse. The doctor on her team put a splint on her leg. leg. Now they had to figure out how to get her out. A message was sent to the surface. Soon a full-scale rescue operation started. The rescue was very challenging. The cave's complex layout and extreme depth meant it took hours just to reach Emily. Rescuers had to navigate through the same tight passages. They carried heavy equipment and medical supplies. They knew any wrong move could make her condition worse. They used ropes and pulleys to slowly move her. They were 2 miles deep in the earth. Emily had gotten her senses back. She had been on several rescue missions before. This was the first time she was being rescued. Emily was very experienced, so she led her own rescue. She instructed the team how they should get her out. She even requested food because she was starving. The rescuers created a makeshift stretcher. They began the difficult journey back to the surface, all while carrying Emily safely. After 3 days of effort, the team finally neared the cave entrance. Emily was awake for 30 hours during the final stages of her evacuation. Emily was immediately taken to a hospital. Doctors treated her leg injuries. Tongue River Cave Incident. On June 2nd, 2004, 5 teenagers gathered at Tongue River Cave in Wyoming. Barry Blaha and Dana Herbert, both 16, convinced their friends to explore the cave. None of them had any real caving experience. They brought cheap flashlights, batteries. They had no helmets or proper caving equipment. The group entered the cave and made their way deeper into the cave. The main passage was spacious at first. They could walk upright and move around easily. As they went deeper, they discovered multiple side passages. Some passages led to dead ends. Barry noticed a narrow crack in the wall that seemed to lead further into the cave. This wasn't on any map. The group crowded into the opening and shined their lights into the passage. The walls looked fractured and unstable. Small stones scattered when touched. Barry and Dana decided to push further into this narrowing passage. While their friends explored other areas, they squeezed through sections. Barry reached a point where the passage became impossibly tight. The walls closed in so much that he couldn't squeeze through. Barry decided to try clearing the obstruction by moving rocks. He managed to work one arm free and grabbed a rock about the size of a softball. Barry began using this rock as a hammer. He struck the larger stones ahead of him to break them apart. Dust began raining down from the ceiling. Suddenly, a massive boulder over 300 pounds broke free from the ceiling. It crashed down directly behind Dana. The fallen boulder had completely sealed the passage. Barry and Dana were trapped in a space barely larger than a coffin. Their friends immediately tried to move the boulder but couldn't. The air in their tiny prison grew stale and warm. Each breath felt insufficient. Muscle cramps set in from being unable to move. Their friends raced back through the cave to get help. They ran to the surface and called emergency services. Professional rescuers arrived with specialized tools. Moving a 300-pound boulder in a narrow cave passage was very challenging. Rescuers had to work in shifts. Only 1 or 2 people could access the work area at a time. Every tool had to be carried through the cave system by hand. Hours passed as the rescue became a race against time. Finally, the rescuers positioned their pulley system to move the boulder. Slowly, inch by inch, the 300-pound stone was pulled away. Barry and Dana could finally move again. They emerged from Tongue River Cave at approximately 10:30 p.m. They had been trapped for nearly 8 hours. Sloan Valley Cave Incident. On May 27, 2008, Steve Gladio led 4 novice cavers into the Sloan Valley Cave system. They planned to go from the post office entrance to the garbage pit entrance. At 11 a.m., the group entered the cave. They expected to emerge at 6 p.m. They encountered thigh-deep water in the big room. The bypass at Echo Junction was completely underwater. Darren, one of the novices, volunteered to swim the 175-foot passage. Darren began swimming. As Darren neared the end of the swim, fatigue overtook him. His arms felt heavy and each breath became desperate. Suddenly he cried out, "Help!" and disappeared beneath the water. Steve was a trained lifeguard and jumped into the water immediately. Steve swam towards Darren in the cold and darkness. When he reached Darren, he was barely conscious. Panic had set in, and Darren grabbed onto Steve. This dragged them both underwater. Steve managed to push Darren towards a steep, muddy bank. Darren was too weak to stand and could barely speak. His body was shutting down from hypothermia. Steve knew time was running out. Steve called out to the others to keep Darren awake. Then Steve swam into the other side. Steve reached the surface and called rescuers. Rescuer arrived within 10 minutes. Steve wanted to go back into the cave to help Darren. There was an argument with the rescuers. Steve grabbed 200 feet of rope, food, water, and a blanket. He stuffed everything into trash bags and headed back into the cave. 40 minutes later, Steve was back at Darren's side. Steve had Darren take off his wet clothes and dried him off. He gave Darren food and water. Slowly, Darren began to improve. The warmth and food helped revive him. It took the rescue squad 5 hours to get Darren across the lake. They carefully moved through the dark, dangerous waters. The entire rescue operation lasted 11 hours. Darren was saved from the brink of death.